Hello and welcome to the Venue Success Podcast. I am your host, Tirzah Caffee, and today I am continuing season 1 with my friend and guest, Amelia Holder. So happy to have you here today. But before we get started, it is time for Crazy Stories with Tirzah because people have lost their minds. So today's story, as always, I wish that I could tell you like the very long version of this because it is absolutely crazy. But the thing that I want to share with you, and I know that many of us probably share this passion, is that we at our venue care very deeply about people that are in the military. And we understand that there are things that happen that are unexpected. People can get deployed, they have to move or things like that. So we have something in our policies and guidelines that basically says, hey, if you get deployed, if something unexpected happens, we are going to do our very best to work with you. So we do ask for proof of deployment and things like that. We want to see that they're active military. We don't want this to be like a loophole for people to be able to cancel their wedding or something, because of course that has happened before. But basically what happened is we had a military couple. They were quite young. He was kind of, I don't know what his actual title was, to be fair, but he was the leader of a platoon of guys, whatever that is. I'm not a military girl. So basically he got grounded, and I'm sure that there's some military term for that, but basically his guys all went out one night and they were naughty. And they got in trouble. And because our groom was in charge of this group of fellows, they were all grounded. And it didn't matter that his wedding was coming up 3 days later. So the bride calls me and I was just like, girl, I'm sure you're frustrated. It was a destination wedding too, which makes it all the worse, right? Everyone's already coming in town. And I'm like, it's okay. We'll move your wedding. And I gave her probably 10 different options, like over the next several months that they could have it. And she was like, I truly cannot believe to this day that she said this. She said, Tirzah, this is just my life and it's just a wedding and I'm just going to have it anyway. And I almost started laughing because I'm like, surely she must be joking. And she was like, there's no other time to do it. And she had this very, might I say, resentful attitude about being a military wife. And she was like, this is just my life. I better get used to it. And so the wedding went on. They had it. Everyone came. Of course, they didn't have the ceremony, but they still had the party. She still wore her dress. They had their fancy reception. The DJ was there. And then throughout the night, we start noticing her hanging out with the best man. And I don't mean just casually hanging out, they were hanging out. And then they started dancing together, and then they started drinking. And then my whole staff, we all started getting extremely uncomfortable because they really started to hit it off. And at the end of the night, they went home together and we never heard from them again. So I still sometimes think of this couple and I wonder, did they actually get married? What happened? I really have no idea. But I could tell you that it was probably one of those top 10 most awkward situations ever, seeing her. And they were mutually definitely flirting with each other all night long. And I'm just like, I don't know. Maybe the groom was like, hey, buddy, take care of my girl. Maybe that happened. I don't know. But anyway, that is Crazy Stories with Tirzah because people have lost their minds. So I highly recommend that when you get married that you're there with your groom. I mean, there's a big benefit to that. Anyway, when us venue owners get together, we literally could write books upon books about stories just like this. And I know that Amelia is listening to this story thinking, oh yeah, I could tell you 10 more stories, probably very similar to that. Because when you work with the general public, there's always crazy things that happen. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to my sweet friend, Amelia Holder, who's here with us to share a bit of her venue story. So introduce yourself. Tell us just a little about your venue, about your family, and let us get to know you today.
Hi. Well, thanks so much. Yeah. Um, my husband and I own Emerson Fields wedding venue in kind of central Missouri. So we're in a very rural area. Um, if you think of St. Louis, Kansas City, straight in the middle of those and about 45 minutes north of that, that's where we are. And we're kind of centrally located in the middle of nowhere, but we have I feel like we've kind of capitalized on that. Like we've made it a thing, like get away to the country, and it's relaxing. We love it here. We live on the estate. It is about 36 acres and we have lodging here. We have a main venue, private lake, and an outdoor wedding pavilion. So yeah, that's kind of our venue. My husband is retired from the Missouri State Highway Patrol, and he was previous to that, he was in the Air Force. And so you're the crazy story. I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, I can relate to the military. Like they own you, and that's a way of life for sure. But we have three grown daughters that are all married. We have six grandkids between the ages of 2 and 6. So there's a lot of them, and they're all really, really tight knit, really close. So that's so much fun. But yeah, I was a wedding photographer for a decade, kind of as our girls were growing up, and just happenstance. Really, this was before like destination weddings were a thing. Before like travel photography and all that. I photographed some weddings in different places. Golf course in Arizona, beaches in Florida, went to Oak Island, photographed, just different places like that. And as I did that and I photographed weddings as a photographer, you were looking at the venue differently through a different lens. And I just kind of started making mental notes of if one day, and so I made all those notes. But on top of that, my husband owns a construction company and he did that part time, kind of when he was on the highway patrol. And he's since retired. He's built everything on our property. And, I think it was probably 2015 or 16. I said, hey, why don't we build a wedding venue? And it took a little coaxing and, thinking through all of that. But his company, we designed it, built it, and we live on site. So it's very personal to us. But we love it. I say it's a fun occasion every weekend, and I love seeing like the two families come together and celebrate. Marriage is important to us. We feel really strongly in supporting marriage, and that's just one of our main things. We really connect with couples and like to support them through the wedding planning because it's their first time. So
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. So, a couple little things I want to hit on. First, about just starting, because there's so many new venues, and I know our listeners are probably predominantly going to be people that are wanting to start a venue. They're, really curious about what that process is like. So, talk to me a little bit about just getting what kind of permit you guys got, like, and what that process was like for you. What were some of the challenges around that?
so we bought the property thinking, it's right along a major highway. Would be a great location. It's very easily accessible, things like that. But also knowing that we were in a rural area, we're in the county, we're not inside any city limit. Um, Therefore, that really minimized the type of permits we had to have, the type of, hoops that we had to jump through, and also the size of our acreage, helped with that. Steve's experience with construction, he knew all of the things, the ADA compliances, all of those types of stipulations. So we built the venue to those specs and kind of followed, the letter of the law with that. But as far as like county, state, city hoops, permits to jump through, we didn't have very many. In fact, I had never put together like a business plan to present, to a bank or anyone. So I reached out to our university extension office, and they helped us put together a business plan, which was great. They helped me do some market research. I really do love like the marketing aspect of that and the data and some of those things. So that was kind of a neat process. But we leaned on, some of those more rural offerings for small business owners. We have a small business counselor and still helping us to this day. So those kind of resources are there, even though we're rural, but there are pros and cons. So we didn't have a
Yeah.
lot of hoops to jump through, but we don't have a lot of, accessibility to resources either.
Right. And I really think that that is an important thing for people to know is like, I see this in a lot of the other groups that are out there and people having these conversations. And it's just, people ask these very sweeping questions about zoning and permits and all
Yes.
this stuff. I'm like, y'all, like it's the wrong
Yes.
question. Like
Yep.
all of us I'm a city venue. Like I'm located in Charlotte, North Carolina, a gigantic city. I am, as a crow flies, about 3 miles from the center of our city. Can you imagine the hoops that are so much different that I
No,
have to jump through than
no.
you being and it's very different. And that's why sometimes I get a little frustrated because I'm like, y'all, you have to know your county. That's all that
You do.
matters. Me
Right.
in North Carolina should not be advising someone in California,
Right.
not understanding, it is goodness. California is a whole beast of its own, but like it is just, I think it is, it's difficult for us because we get this idea, oh, I want to start a wedding venue. But listen, how many of us have experience in this? Really none, right? And
Hmm.
so getting your local resources, I love that you said that, tapping into your local resources that
Yeah.
are going to help you know what to do is so vital. I love that. So let me circle back to the other thing that you said was that you live on site. So
Yes.
that triggers me because I grew up, if any of you have heard my first episode, I grew up in a venue. So we moved into a historic venue when I was 13 years old. It was condemned and we used the outhouse, like the literal 9-stall outhouse, right? So we grew up, we renovated the house and lived in it, and we did 100 weddings a year, and I rented my room out, right? I hear you say you live on site, and I just am, and I know a lot of people do. Tell me how you balance living on site and or maybe there is no balance, let's be honest,
No.
and having a venue just
Right.
basically in your
Right.
backyard. Tell me more about that and what that's been like. And maybe your kids, they weren't as young as I was, I'm
They weren't.
presuming.
No, no,
Yes.
no. I will start the conversation by saying I never would have done this when our kids were young or still at home. Family's important to us, and I just wouldn't have been able to raise them. I feel like I'm raising a venue now, so I never would have done it then, I don't think. Um, Now, no kids at home, we're doing it together. We have, help. But living on site, I knew from the beginning, like the convenience of it. And when we purchased this property, I mean, when I tell you I thought through everything about photography, there's I'm impossible to live with, I'm sure, because I'm like, there's a row of, there's a tree line on the west side. It would be nice to have a lake right there in front of that tree line, and then have the venue, and the venue needs to sit south to south west, not directly west, because that's where the sun's going to set. And then we need something on the east side of the venue that doesn't face the sunset when they're having an outdoor ceremony. Guess what? All the things. So saying all that, I had thought through all of those things and also kind of laid out a plan of um, initially we built a home that we lived in while we built the venue. Then the next year we built the pavilion and just kind of got things up and going. And then we on the separate part of the property, like we've surveyed it off. This is our 10 acres over here. And we built a different home. We have our own little pond out back for our grandkids to swim and fish in. And so there's the venue is kind of the north end of the property, and we live on the south end of the property. And so I can see everything from my house and vice versa. But by doing that, that did help kind of create that boundary. We have a private drive sign, we all come up the same lane, but if you go right, you're going to go to my house and there's a private drive sign. And it's very apparent, if you go left, that's the venue, the parking lot, those things. So, I mean, yeah, we've tried to put things in place that there are boundaries, but it wasn't that way at first because we just weren't of the mindset of we want to jump into this and, throw millions of dollars in and hope it works. And, we took it in steps. So, the ability to do that also that, the construction part of it and engineering part of it is, that's kind of Steve's cup of tea. So,
Yeah, it's so
yeah.
great that you have that, and it's not always common to have a partner, a business partner that is so well versed in that. So you're definitely a blessed, very
Yeah.
blessed lady in that regard. So tell me about when you first started your venue. I'm sure you were doing hard hat tours and all that kind of stuff and trying to pre-book some clients. But what was that process like the first couple of years? Like, were you, I'm sure, very nervous? The whole build it and they will come. It's like,
Hmm.
I hope they come.
Hmm.
And how quickly did you find yourself getting booked to a place that you felt really happy with your bookings?
So the very first year we opened in May, and when we opened, we had about 30 weddings on our books, booked,
Fantastic.
pre-booked, and we had done those, like you say, hard hat tours. We had, I think, 3 or 4 couples book before there were even any walls. They just heard of it, and again, you're in a rural area, people know us or know of us, know my husband is in construction, know, I'm a photographer. So there was some of that it wasn't like they were blindly signing on the dotted line, hoping, we did what we say we were going to do. But it it was interesting because just that momentum at first really helped us. And I felt like for sure the first few years, like we were about as booked as we wanted to be as a new venue. Um, and that changes over time. Kind of how many weddings do you want to do a year? What do your bookings look like? We now take January and February off completely. We close, like, don't call me. I'll be, in Cancun, or I'll be on vacation, or, just hibernating a little bit. Missouri winters are rough. They are icy and cold. Missouri in January, February. It's not fun. Um, so yeah, we've set more parameters as we went along, to kind of to help us with that.
Awesome. So, what is a great booking year for you guys? Because I know you do full weekend weddings, which is, I think, a very popular thing for sure. And you have on site accommodations, which is incredible.
Mhm. A dream year for us is probably somewhere around 35 weddings. Kind of that May through October window. We would like all those weekends, to be primarily booked. There is, excuse me, typically a weekend or two that we take off, through the summer. Sometimes it's around the 4th of July. We did this year take off the weekend of July 6th. We had the venue floors waxed. We flushed all the AC lines. We did, just maintenance and things like that. So it would be probably around 35 for us with full weekends.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So let's talk a little bit about the market. I know you're in the Midwest, but I know many venues around you that are saying similar things to what venues on the East Coast are saying, and that is that the the past couple of years have really changed. And one of the big things that I have noticed is the incredible amount of new venues that have popped up in the last 3 years. And it's hard for me not to cringe every time I see another one, but I'm like, the American
Yeah,
dream is there for everyone.
it is.
um, uh, but tell me how you have adapted, and if you have seen kind of a shift in the market as well.
I've definitely seen a shift in the market. Let's see, this is 2024. I really feel like probably late 22, early 23, just feeling a little bit of a shift there. And still, I mean, I still consider myself a fairly new venue owner. I mean, you're a legacy venue owner. You've been in it since you were a teenager. Um, and even having the photography background, like, that's one thing, but the venue ownership and dynamics I may understand the industry, but this has been completely different. And when I tell you so much more work, you know what I'm saying, but and yeah, a new prospective venue owner maybe doesn't quite understand that, but I've seen some shifts in the market for sure. I felt like we would build a venue, we would get our processes down, things would start to flow. I've got my emails, that I send out as reminders. I've just like everything kind of felt gelled and good, like 22-ish, in 2022. And then it started to not feel that way. And I think some of the dynamics, in just the season that we were in as a country, I think for this year, I mean, you could throw a potpourri of reasons or ideas out, economics, the economy, the presidential election, Gen Z, whatever you want to say. But overall, I do feel like it's something that I hadn't really thought about. I'm going to need to adapt and change things as I go. Like my processes kind of need to change. I need to meet the customer where they are. And so every once in a while, and I think that was kind of my first phase of that, like late 22, early 23, of like thinking, I may need to switch things up a little bit because this doesn't seem to be always clicking like it did.
Give me an example of something that you felt like you needed to change up.
Probably more recently, a good example is through our CRM, we have the capacity to text clients. I've never even used it before this year. Never needed to. Here's the, intake form they fill out on the website, puts them into my system. Here are the, personal emails kind of at first, and then we get them, booked, and then I need you to fill out this form, and then the whole process, like, it is laid out. And now I see that some of that process adds a little bit of friction. And if you add a little bit of friction to a little younger generation, or mix that in a blender, if you will, it wasn't quite hitting, like it used to. So I'm like, maybe I need to, think through some of these things. The intake form maybe doesn't need to know, everything about their wedding. The form that I'm sending, before they come for a tour, let's downsize that. We can find some of this information out when they actually come to visit us.
Yes.
Things that were helping me necessarily weren't helping or ease of use for them.
Yes.
So
no, I love that. And I would say I'm right there with you. That's exactly what I'm seeing too. So I call it decision overwhelm. I think that this generation has a hard time in general making decisions. And I'm kind of blown away by that. And they get overwhelmed very easily. The increase in the amount, we do about 40 tours a month, roughly 40 to 50 tours a month. We get about 400 new leads a month. And so because we're city venue, right, like the numbers are always just, they're always going to be a little bit higher for us. And I think sometimes in a city, you see things a little bit sooner than you do in some of the rural areas. I've just always kind of seen that. And so I've been seeing this probably for close to 3 years and trying to figure out, like, how do we speak to these people so that we could help them? It became all about kind of like, we call them baby bears, like, oh, take care of the baby bears, like, and it's really, honestly, I can't say it's their fault. Like, it is just, these things happen generationally, and I have no explanation for why. But literally, if I were to give anyone advice right now, if you're like, hey, I need to adjust the way that I am selling, the way that I'm communicating, it's this: use less words. Just, and on the words that you do use, be very strategic about them.
Yes.
And this generation does not like to hear the word no. And so they want to feel that your venue is so accommodating, that they're going to have liberty to do whatever they want, which we know that there's no venue that is, any good venue isn't going to be like that.
No.
But even just warming them up to the things that you need to share with them, and not like putting it all at them right at the beginning.
All at once.
Yes,
Exactly.
because they don't even know what is important to obsess about. Like, we have people that literally haven't even booked their date yet, and they're freaking out about what they're going to have for their grand exit. And I'm like,
Yes. Yes.
yo, like, your wedding's in 2 years. Like, you don't need to
Slow
worry about it.
down.
But they don't want to
Yeah.
be told, don't think about that.
Right.
And so, and so it takes so much patience, right? Like, to guide these little baby bears that have decision overwhelm. And let's add the element of the helicopter mom. Ooh, yes. Oh, I got to take care of my fragile little child that I created.
Yes. Right.
Yes. So anyway, I completely agree with you. Anything?
That makes me think about, like, though, when probably you and I were married, like, the thing to do was you got married at the church, and you did cake and punch in the basement of the church or whatever. Like, there was no dinner when we got married. There was no dance. Very minimal really work in planning the wedding. We are so far away from that with this generation. But if you think about how foreign it is to us, even people our age, to think about doing a destination wedding. You're not going to get married in your hometown. You're not going to use the church you grew up in. You're not going to just use the reception hall. Like, no, we're way past that. And just that friction, that generational gap, apply that to these couples nowadays and magnify it, I feel like, times 10. It doesn't make sense to them that there are these parameters and things, that we're putting into place. So I think really it kind of comes down to, like, explaining the value of your venue and what you're going to help them with, offer to them. In fact, I've tried to actually stop using the word help. I'm going to guide you. That is kind of my new phrase. Like, we're going to help you figure out the budget. It's going to be, kind of a process, because they want to figure out everything. Like, I need a budget outline. I need to know, what are the appetizers going to cost? What, like, whoa. Yeah. We haven't even decided the date yet. So yeah, for sure.
Right. Well, and I think too that we've also seen, and we could talk about this for hours, good gracious, but, like, I've seen that people are taking a little bit longer to make their decision. They're wanting to see more of what's out there, because there is, I know, well, you've got the market in your town, so maybe you don't deal with what I deal with, but they're wanting to see more, and they are taking longer. And, but that's also very difficult, because it's like, how do you stay front of mind with all these people that may be going to venues that are like, oh, the world's your oyster, you could do whatever you want? And that's definitely not how it is at my venue. But here's the thing that I know to be true, and how I have kind of adapted to that, is that I always think about the fastest way to make money is to solve problems. Like, that's just business 101. You solve problems, you make money. And so you have to think about, what are the problems. You and I, as mature women, don't see these as problems, but this generation, what do they see as a problem? And trying to talk to people in that generation, trying to get into their headspace and help them see that we are the place that they could feel safe, and that we could solve their problems, which are, they don't want to be making a lot of decisions. They really don't. They think that they want this place where they have no boundaries, but they actually really don't, because they're going to have to make 1,000 times more decisions at a place like that than a place like mine. Now, every venue is different. So how does Amelia, like, how does she solve the problems for the people that are looking for rural full day weekend weddings and all that kind of stuff? So
well,
anyway,
speaking of what you said about taking longer to decide, we had a couple a year ago this month inquire, tour, great. I thought they loved it. Fell off the face of the earth, didn't hear from them. They're out of our pipeline. Like, I have archived, that file. I'm just like, well, something else, must have come up. They chose something else. They re-inquired this month and booked this venue, our venue. I'm like, what? But, they had something major happen in their life during planning, so they just put it on pause.
Yep.
Whereas, just even that, I'm like, that doesn't even compute to me that you would just put your wedding on pause. But they couldn't, there was no other option in their mind. That's what they did. They came back and they booked it. So I do think those follow-ups and that, that guidance that we're giving them, ending the new lead relationship on a good note.
Yes.
Because you never know.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. You never know. And on the flip side of all this, before we end for today, because of course, again, we could go on and on about so many different things. But on the flip side of that, something else that we've seen, I'm curious if you've experienced this yet this year, but we have had an insane amount of people come in and do fast turnaround weddings. So we had a girl, she was out in Arizona. She actually, this went viral, actually. It's a wedding that we did because we had the Clemson Tiger come. Her dad used to be the Clemson Tiger, and he had passed away. And so the mom surprised her by having the current Clemson Tiger come and walk her down the aisle. Anyway, it went viral. It's super crazy. That wonderful family, they booked 7.5 weeks before their wedding. Then we had another one recently that was like 6 weeks. We've done a pretty large amount in the last probably year that were less than 2 months. And I think it does go hand in hand with the, like, I'm stressed out by this. I just want to rip the Band-Aid and just be done with it. And so, I mean, on our side, we're like, dude, if we have the date open 8 weeks in advance, like, let's go. And it's easy for us, being all inclusive to do that. But so I think really kind of like to tie a bow in all of this is that you have to understand that this is not a static situation. Like, marketing is something that fluctuates, people change. You cannot just be okay with status quo. You always have to be also thinking forward and trying to anticipate. It's hard to do, but anticipating what may be. And sometimes you will be right and sometimes you don't. And sometimes you have to just experiment with things and see how people react to it, right? One of the things that I saw that I started to freak out about here in Charlotte is that I'm in these Charlotte and North Carolina groups, and everyone started saying, give me your best venue, blah, 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 but no barns. One day I sat down and I screenshot, honest to goodness, 35 within about 3-month window that I scrolled. 35 different posts of people saying, hey, I'm looking for such and such, but no barns. And this was, I think it was probably a couple of years ago I started seeing this. So I sat down with my team and I was like, I see something happening and we've got to pivot. We can't change our reception space. Right. It is what it is, but what can we do? And so we completely transformed our Instagram, all of our social channels, our website, our language. So we don't have a barn. We have a modern reception space. Oh, yes, we do. And what are we, like a barn venue? No, we are a secret garden in the heart of Charlotte. That's what we are with a modern reception space. Is it deceiving? No, because the thing is when you come into, it looks like a barn on the outside, but when you come into the inside, it doesn't look like a barn at all. So again, you just
kind of a barn shape. I mean,
exactly.
It's a And we're the same. Yeah, it's a venue, and it's a modern venue. It's elegant. Is it in a barn shape? Yes, it's very similar to a barn shape. But I have it on my shirt, and I'm like, it's something like you said. You have to just be ahead of those curves in the industry, and seeing that. I tried to write blogs on those types of things before, like you said, before they actually hit our area, because those are the things that everyone's Googling, those are the things that they're saying in the Facebook groups. But that's a whole nother beast of staying ahead of things. And like you said, thinking forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like we've been around the block a few times, right? So if you're listening to this in your new venue, like the thing is, I want to encourage listeners is to just take a step. And you don't know, like every market is different. Just take a step. You're going to fail. I just tell clients that I coach all the time, just fail forward. Don't let it be something that makes you feel defeated. All of us that have been very successful in this industry, we're successful because we failed and haven't given up more than anyone else, right? We are resilient and we just keep, we make mistakes, we learn and grow, pivot, and go from there. So any closing words for us today, Amelia, for any of our listeners, anything that you'd love to share?
Well, I mean, we've kind of talked about like newer venue owners and, up and coming trend is, I wanted to build a venue. I've always wanted to do this. It's been my dream. And that's great. But I feel like sometimes, and I'm probably as guilty as anyone, sometimes as a venue, we make it look too easy. They don't see the back end of all the things. It is not easy. It's hard work. This is the hardest job I've ever had. This is the most work we've ever done. And, we're in our mid 50s. And like, this isn't a retirement gig. This isn't a build it and then you sit back and they, have a party every weekend. There's just so much more to it. And sometimes I feel like more established venues, because we're in a routine, because we've done this now hundreds and hundreds of times, we make it look easy and it looks like it's probably a cash cow or, very hands off. And that is the furthest thing from the truth. So definitely do your homework before you start, like you say, down that road of building the venue, and don't be afraid of hard work.
Absolutely. And I agree with you. Like anyone that is in my close circles understands that Tirzah doesn't have a social life, and I have 7 full-time staff. Even with that, I am working all of the time. This is a very exhausting, it's a hard life, and more people, more problems, right? So the more successful you are, the more expensive it is to run that venue, because you have to have more staff. Oh my goodness, let's not talk about that today. That's a whole other thing. But, okay. When you have 115 to 130 all-inclusive weddings a year, like that is a whole different thing. And I can't even, I'm so glad that you say that, because this is not an industry for people that don't want to work hard. It is not a cash cow, I promise you.
Right.
So anyway, today has been so fun, Amelia. Thank you for taking the time to just be on the show today, to let people get to know you and hear some of your expertise. I'm really so grateful for you. But thank you everyone for listening to today's episode. Be sure and subscribe to my channel to be notified of future episodes. And if you would like to be a guest on my show, there's a link in our show notes to apply. But again, thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Amelia. Have a great day.